Welcome back to Switch to Linux. It is Monday and it is time for another Top 5. And I want to talk about the top 5 tools you use for podcasting today. Podcasting is pretty big and it's surprisingly still possibly even more relevant than videos and things like that. And, eventually I will start moving some of my Switch to Linux series onto podcasting. But I'm still trying to get some other places caught up on it first. But what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the process I use with podcasting because everything that I'm doing is all done on Linux. And we're going to walk through, and I'm going to have to do this 1 through 5 instead of 5 through 1 because there's just kind of a process in all of this. And what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through each one of the tools that I use and how I use them. But before we do that, let me just show you first what I'm doing in the podcasts that I do have right now. So these are tied to my Christian work. So if you did not know, I have a Christian channel as well. I keep all that stuff separate from the Linuxy and tech stuff. But you can head on over to my website, which is at ourwalkinchrist.com, spelled like this. And you can get information on all the things. Now, what you'll see here is that I have on my site, I have all of the various podcast links that I have where you can get this. The only one of these that is actually hosted on some other site other than mine is Podomatic. And the only reason I use that particular software for hosting is this is the only current system that gives you a free system that easily allows you to potentially get on Spotify, which is the only place I'm not on because Spotify is not taking podcast submissions at the time I'm recording this video. But here is the Podomatic page. If this ends up being something that I see a lot of use out of, I will actually purchase their plans as well. It's actually a bit of a pain because everything else is all done in one location, that being my site. Theirs, I actually have to post everything a second time on theirs. But like I said, it does give you good statistics. The free account gives you up to 500 megabytes of storage space, which if you are formatting your audio files correctly is an okay thing. And it does give you, I think, 15 gigabytes of bandwidth transfer, so that's pretty significantly sized. And if you need more than that, you're probably making some money off your podcast, and you should definitely pay for it. There are other podcast services I use, such as Bulbrry. I use them mostly for the free stats. I don't actually use them for hosting it because I have tons and tons and tons and tons of server space and bandwidth of my own. For a person that doesn't have as much server space and bandwidth, this is probably the one you would want to buy. And I'm working on getting some affiliate links for those. So depending on when you see this video, there may or may not be affiliate links for this down below. Of course, this is the TuneIn page. TuneIn is one of the top places you can get for your podcasts. These, I believe, are all fed from my site. I'm not exactly sure how TuneIn works, if they grab my files and then host them themselves, or if they grab it directly from mine. But all I had to do is submit my podcast URL feed, and they are all over there on TuneIn. Of course, the number one place for podcasting is still iTunes, and so the way I'm going to show you how to do this, or at least I'll tell you how to do it. I'm not going to show it here in full detail. The iTunes is polling from my servers, but it lists on theirs. So if you happen to have any Apple product and you're using any Apple products for podcasting, you have that available. I also have the Google link, which I'm not going to show you here because you have to be logged in on Google, and my Waterfox page is not. And there's a few other places that the podcasts are listed as well. I pretty much only listed the ones here that have very easy way of real easy tools. Plus I have the direct feed here, and this is the actual RSS feed fed directly from my website itself. So this is the one if you're using something like gpodder or Rhythmbox on Linux. We'll get into that as my number 5. That is actually the feed that you want to use to feed that in, and that's just going to make sure you have everything. So if you are interested in that podcast, you can head on over to the site, pick your favorite tool, and then download from that. So let's go ahead and get into the tools that I'm using to do all of my podcasting on a Linux system. Number one is Audacity. You need a good audio editor. Obviously, I'm not talking about the hardware. You want a good mic. I'm using the Samson Meteor mic. There is a link to this in my description down below. The Meteor mic, I like that one because it is the sound quality is very good. It comes with a very nice carrying case. It's easily portable, and it kind of stands itself where you can mount it like I have it mounted. So obviously you need the hardware to do that. But outside of that, now you need to get into your software. I use Audacity as my main software system, and the reason I use that is that it is a good free and open source audio editor. You can use it to capture your audio, or you can use it to edit your audio. In my case, since I'm doing everything as videos, everything is output as a video file, I can actually import my videos directly into Audacity and export the audio. Also, though, what I'm going to use Audacity for is I'm going to want to import my audio, and then I want to add an outro, possibly an intro and also an outro. So what I'll do here is I will open up a file that I've dropped on my desktop. So here is, for example, one of my files. And then what I want to do is I just want to import another line of audio, and this is my outro. Now, just to make sure that everything wasn't my voice specifically, I actually had someone else record my outro just so that it's a little bit different. That's obviously an optional thing. And all I'm going to do is just attach that where I want. Occasionally, I might cut out what I had on the old site, on the old podcast, or the old audio. It just depends on how I did my outro. But regardless, I just go ahead and attach the outro however I want to attach it. And then I'm going to export my audio. So we'll just go ahead and export my audio to, let's drop it back into that thing there. And I want to make sure it's exported as an MP3 file. I'm just going to call this test.mp3. And then what I'm actually going to use is, if you don't go with like 170, 210 kilobit per second, that's going to give you a very big file if you're doing a talking podcast. If you happen to be doing musical type things, then that's probably what you want to do. But I actually come over here, I pick my average, and then what's really good for podcasting, I use 96. I'd actually like to use 64, but some podcasting things have a minimum requirement. So 96 is the minimum requirement to get on any podcasting systems. And it might be a little higher. Double check that. Double check. It might be a little higher. I thought it was 96. It might be 128. But double check the exact size. It's actually on my other operating system where I actually do this. That's all listed. But I pick the minimum size I can because it keeps my file size small, which is what you want. You want its smallest file size with the best quality audio. This is what gives you that. I guess I'm either using 96 or then the first 100. Then when you go ahead and save it, it's going to give you your ability to put some basic tag in here. This is not going to be enough. And so I'm just going to fill this out with basic information, and then we're going to want to add to that a little bit later. So it's going to export my audio, and now my audio will be exported. And then we just need to move over to our next tool, which we will talk about in just a moment. Number 2, GIMP. The reason you need to use GIMP is you have to have cover art or at least a podcast art in order to have a podcast. The way this will work is many places you can set just a default general image, but the best way to do a podcast is you want to embed your image into your audio file. That way, if somebody has it on a device, instead of just seeing some generic image on the screen, you can actually see an image related specifically to that podcast. So what I actually have in my GIMP is I took the time to build out a basic template file. So all of mine look at this, and you want to look at your specific requirements, in which case I'm running this image here as a 1000 pixel by 1000 pixel, and let me grab the actual image dimension. So I'm using 1000 by 1000 with a 72 DPI resolution. These are all published. You want to look up all the places you want to podcast to. You pretty much want to take Apple's recommendations and use that for everything because that's going to be the best in the industry. So I'm using 1000 by 1000, which is the most recommended size. You could go a little bit smaller, but again, we're going for the smallest size we can possibly do without losing quality. And so here I have my basic template, in which case I have everything in exactly the way I want, and then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and grab this, and I'm going to change the title. So we'll do a test podcast, and then what I'm actually going to do is center it with my centering tools, just making sure that everything is perfectly centered, and then what I like to do is add a drop shadow over it. And what I do is Control F will duplicate that a few times. Just give myself a few of those, just give it a little bit. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to export that. And I'm just going to export this as, I'm just going to say PC-test. And I want to save this as a JPEG because that's the, JPEG gives you generally a smaller size without compromising your quality, particularly if you set the output quality about 80 is what generally works well. So now we'll have our podcast test right here. That is, this is the file size that'll work. And what we'll see here is that my file is 239 kilobit in size. A little big, but not overwhelmingly bad. So now we have our audio, we have our file, we are going to move on to our next step. Number 3. I'm going to use Kid3 as my audio tagger. There are a variety of different audio taggers, and obviously use the audio tagger that you like the best. If you don't have one that you've used, I prefer Kid3. It has a lot of functionality. It has a variety of different tag types. Very easy to use. I just really like Kid3 all around. So the way this is going to work is here we have our Kid3 is opened up. Of course, we're just going to use our bottom navigation pan on the left to navigate to our individual folder. Up here is our files. So for example, this is the podcast that we created. Excuse me, test is the podcast that we created. My outro is just my outro. So test is the one that we've created. What you'll see is that we have an ID tag 2, but we don't have a tag 1. It's really important. You want to make sure that you have a tag 1 and a tag 2 because different MP3 players will use different pods. For example, my MP3 player I keep in the kitchen for listening to stuff while I cook, that only reads tag 1. It doesn't read tag 2. And so it's very easy. You just create tag 2 the way you want, and then you hit from tag 2 up here, and it's automatically going to create it. So over here, let's go ahead and create our title. We're going to call this a podcast test. That should have been in there already. I must have neglected to put it in my original file. So we're going to do podcast test. We're going to make sure we have our artist name correct, our album correct, any other information, comments, dates, track number. Now, what we want is we need that file. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to my file where we just created that podcast test. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. I'm just going to drag it right there where it says drag album artwork here. What that's going to do is it's going to embed the artwork into the album. So now everything is the way we want it. So I'm going to expand tag 1, hit the copy from tag 2. Now you'll see in the upper left-hand pane there that there is a little indicators that looks like a disk. That means that this needs to be saved. So we're going to go ahead and save that file. Let's go ahead and go back to the file there. And now if I open this up in certain players, for example, VLC, if I open up my test inside my VLC player, then it will actually display that artwork as it's playing. So now this is the type of functionality you want. Versus if I open up something without it in VLC, then it would just give me my basic VLC logo. What that means is that if you are playing your podcast in a device that supports the image, then it's going to actually give you the image relevant to that individual file. Now, it may or may not give you the generic one depending on what your player happens to be. That's why you always want to make sure that you embed your image inside of your podcast. Number 4, we want to have some way to host your podcasting. This is the thing that's going to be really variant depending on how you're doing things. Like I said, I have a lot of server space. I have a lot of the technical knowledge, and so I do all of this myself. And that's really, Apple doesn't host your podcast. They just list your feed. Google doesn't host your podcast. They just list your feed. A lot of these places, all they're doing is they're going to list your feed. They're not actually going to host your podcast for you. So you need a way to do that. So you either can use a platform that is a self-hosted, or you can purchase free space. Or like I said, if your podcast is fairly small and you're just getting started, you might just go ahead and check out, as I had mentioned earlier, check out Podomatic. This is all done on the free account. Okay, so, you can get your followers, you get your basic information. Someone can come over here, they can listen to it on the website, they can play it. I'm pretty sure there's probably a way that you can grab it other places. Here is the, that address wasn't understood there. Like I said, I'm not sure what that one is, but that's the, I have the correct iTunes one listed on my website. I'm not sure where Podomatic's going. TuneIn, of course, this is pulling from my feed. So a couple options. One of those is Blubrry. This is probably considered one of the standards for hosting. They can be a little bit more pricey than some of the other ones. This is why I'd steer you towards some of the free ones. Of course, 100 megabytes, $12 per month for a weekly 20-minute podcast is what they're recommending. There's 250 megabyte per month, which is $20 per month. So an hour per week, and then it kind of goes up from there. Like I said, the Podomatic gives you 500 megabytes on their free tier and a whole lot more on their paid tier, which is significantly less. Now, you want a Blubrry account either way because you can get some great statistics on this. And the statistics, they don't grab a lot of user data, but they will show me how many times the thing has been downloaded, how many subscribers you have, how many are new each given month. That's basic information that I kind of wanted to see. So you can grab the plans from over here. There's numerous other places to host your podcasts. Like I said, Blubrry is one of the best. And the reason I use the Blubrry account is I'm hosting mine on my own site, but I'm tying everything into a Blubrry, and I'm utilizing Blubrry's PowerPress plugin in order to create all of my feeds and things. And the reason is this takes a lot of the guesswork out of setting it up, which I could easily do that as well. But this got me already set up for iTunes. Here's how to set it up on iTunes. Here's how to set it up on Google Play. It basically gets everything ready so you can just click the button, submit to them, and then everything should automatically be taken into account without spending a ton of extra time. The other reason I did this is that there is the ability to have custom podcast feeds based on your category. So I have one general feed that's most places, but if you actually want to get more specific, I will have two feeds eventually. One of those covers just my Daily Walk series. The other one covers my studies as well. And so those are the reasons why you would want to use something like Blubrry's PowerPlus plugin. And then what you can do with that is that gives you the extra ability to just see some analytics from your dashboard, which are very basic. Now you can pay for more advanced stuff that might do more things than I want to know or I want to collect any information on. I pretty much just want to see how's the podcast doing, how many downloads, how many new people. That's all I'm interested in, and the free statistics gives me those. If you are wanting to set up all of your own feeds utilizing a WordPress code, there is a codex page, it's codex.wordpress.org/podcasting. This tells you how to set up everything, how to set up your various feeds. If you follow all this kind of work, you can set up custom podcast feeds without having to install an extra plugin. This isn't a bad idea, and I might even look at doing this down the road. Maybe when I get to the Linux ones, I might use this instead of using the bulbrry statistics, just so I can get a chance to see which one works better, because I generally like to do everything myself custom without relying on external plugins. If you happen to be wanting to use a WordPress.com website, which are a decent plan. Now, of course, this only works if you are doing the paid plans, so the personal, premium, or business, which is $4 per month, $8 per month, or $25 per month. You can get your own custom domain name. A lot of other reasons to do this. Not my personal favorite, because I like to have a little bit more control over my website. But if you're not a web guy like I am, you don't necessarily need that much extra control. So you could actually do this with the personal plan or higher. And then you can actually just set up your podcasting directly from within WordPress without having to have an external plan. And they'll walk you through here on this. This is the support.wordpress.com/audio/podcasting. This will how to set it up, how to submit it to Apple, things like that. And of course, they do tell you in the notes you have to have a personal, premium, or business plan to do that. So that's my number 4, is some place to host it. It might be WordPress. It might be Podomatic. There's actually a handful of other companies that range from $5 a month on up, depending on the type of information you want. Like I said, bulbrry is kind of the standard in the field. There will be some affiliate links down there for that, hopefully down the road. As of I'm recording this, I don't have those. Podomatic is what I'm using. The downside for me is it takes me twice as long because I have to submit everything on my site, which pushes it everywhere around the whole world, and then I have to do everything again for Podomatic. It doesn't take a ton of time. And I'm guessing the same would be for bulbrry as well. That's because I have access to all these extra servers. If you don't, and you're not needing all this kind of stuff, definitely go with one of those other services as well. Because I pay for my server space too. It's just generic. So that is my number 4. That brings us to number 5. You want to have a way just to test your podcasting, make sure it's working. Of course, if you happen to have an Apple device laying around, definitely subscribe to your own podcast on your Apple device. It's going to allow you to test it, make sure everything's working. Have an Android device, test it on Google Play stuff. I verified everything's working with the various accounts that I need to have to make those work. But actually, with Rhythmbox, you can certainly test your Apple feed. You can also custom import into both Rhythmbox and another application called gpodder, which you can use to test and make sure everything's working. Now, I'm showing you these in the Software Center here because I don't actually have these installed on this computer because this is a development computer. I actually test my podcasts on the computer next to me here. But anyway, what we're going to do is just have a look at a couple of the software applications. Rhythmbox, of course, is a very popular music player. It is pre-installed on many Linux distros. But you can actually come into here. There's a podcast button, and with the podcast button, you can go ahead and add podcasts. As of now, you can actually search for my podcast directly in the search bar in Rhythmbox, Our Walk in Christ podcast. That will show up. You can subscribe to it there, or you can just grab the custom feed that your WordPress site exports, paste that into the site, and you can go ahead and use Rhythmbox for doing your podcasting. Another one that is a popular one is called gpodder. This one here is pretty nice, and with gpodder you can just enter the RSS feed that you find wherever you find that feed, and then you'll have a list of all of your podcasts over here on the one side and all of your episodes to listen to on the other. Downside of this is it stores the music in a weird place. Rhythmbox actually downloads the music to a folder in your music directory, which makes a little bit more logical sense. gpodder actually stores it in a configuration folder in your home drive. So if you're backing up your whole home drive, you should still get these. You want to verify that if you are using some custom or just some way of making a backup of your home file for your backup archives. You want to make sure that this folder is in there. You have to hunt for it a little bit. Rhythmbox downloads them directly to your music folder in your home folder on Linux. So gpodder and Rhythmbox are the two applications that I've used to test the podcasting. I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but those are kind of my top picks. So thanks for coming along on this video on making podcasts. Hopefully it was helpful for you. If you've been thinking about doing a podcast, maybe this will give you that final nudge to get your podcast out there. If you'd like to help support the channel, check out switchtolinux.com/support. There's information on all the various ways you can help support us. You can get some merchandise. I have t-shirts, coffee cups, there's a mouse pad that I have, and of course this is what the travel mugs might look like. You can get those at shop.switchtolinux.com. And I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/TomM. So thanks for watching, and hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.